Hello and welcome to Human Resources 6302, Human Resources Management. This is Dr. Casper, and today we are going to talk about job analysis, or shall I say, this presentation is on job analysis. So let's get started. So, what you need to know about job analysis. You need to know about the core elements of a job description, which is part of the job analysis process. You should know how we obtain information for job analysis, how job analysis and job descriptions are used within an organization. So if we talk about workflow within an organization, we talk about the design is the process of looking at the tasks necessary for production of your widget, whatever that might be, or the service that you might be providing. We talk about the position. So outside the big picture, we talk about the inner workings, what each person in a job needs to do. And we talk about the job. So it's the set of related duty. I know position and job seem to be very similar, but they're not necessarily the same thing. There is some overlap there. Okay, so we develop a workflow analysis. Inputs can fall into three areas: raw inputs, what materials, data, or information are required, the equipment that you might need, and let's say human resources, what KSAs are required to do the job or required for the person to do the job. We look at the activity. So what do they physically, mentally need to do to get the job done? And then the output. What is being created? Is it being created well? And how do we measure that? So workflow analysis identifies the input required to carry out the work processes. It looks at how that takes place in the context of an organization structure. Now, doing this workflow analysis certainly takes cooperation of individual and groups within the organization. And ideally, an organizational structure will allow people to come together and collaborate to understand and define these activities. So, besides looking at the workflow of each process, we need to see how the work fits within the context of the organization structure. Got a little frog in my throat today. The structure may do this in a way that is highly centralized, that is, with authority concentrated at the top of an organization, similar to the graphic that is there. Could be decentralized, with authority spread among many people. Organizations also sometimes structure the company according to functions. So instead of having operations, you may have groups that do welding, painting, packaging across the entire organization. Finally, perhaps it may set up divisions to focus on products or customer groups. The interesting thing about these organizations is that sometimes, if you make a hybrid of this sort of an organization, you have a matrix reporting relationship. So a welder may report to their own business head and into the welding function at the same time. Okay, so if we're looking at the design and structure, we need to bring people together who collaborate and have them collaborate efficiently to produce desired outputs as we try to define the design and structure of a job. So I talked about this a minute ago. The organization could be centralized, decentralized, functional, or it could be based on product or customer. So in the continuation of the job analysis, we need to get detailed information about jobs. Now, to achieve a high quality performance, organizations really have to understand the job requirements and their people. Analyzing jobs and understanding what is required to carry out a job provides the essential knowledge for staffing, training, performance appraisals, and many other HR activities. Let me say that again. We use this job analysis for many things in human resources, including staffing, hiring, recruiting, training, performance appraisals. So the job analysis will yield a job description, the job specs as well, as we were talking about. So the writer of the job description must identify the critical task, both mental and physical, and any methods or resources required to do the job, and then have a very good idea or outline of the output of the job and where it fits within the organization and what the organization structure is. This person, usually in HR, collaborates, coordinates with the functional area, supervisors, and even speaks with the incumbent within a job. So the job analysis will yield a couple of things: job descriptions and job specifications. So job descriptions, I will load a copy of a job description into, well, let me say that again. Google a job description so you can take a look at a job description. Many job descriptions are used within a posting for a job. It's pretty simple, but they consist of a list of tasks, duties, and responsibilities for a particular job. And we've just reviewed how you define and come up with those TDRs. You don't sit in a room and kind of make it up or even look at what others have done on the web. You need to be actively involved in collaborating within your organization. Sometimes the HR is really just the collector of information. They might send out a survey or speak to a supervisor or incumbent in a job and have that person, supervisor, generally fill out a form that you've created that lists the task, the duties, and the responsibilities of a particular job. That paperwork is then usually signed by the supervisor and by his direct report. And typically, this occurs anytime it gets updated and occurs anytime that they're trying to hire somebody into a particular position. So the key parts of a job description, clearly the job title, and sometimes this is more important than just making up a job title. Sometimes you've got supervisor level A, supervisor level B, or welder 1, welder 2, welder 3, welder 4. And those could be different job titles, and they could be and have different duties and responsibilities. So summarize the TDRs, and then you do need to have, for legal purposes, a list of the essential duties with their detailed specification of the tasks involved to carry out each duty. Now, if you remember from our legal discussion, ADA requires that people can perform the essential duties of a job. So, for example, if you have a supervisor, they can supervise people, but occasionally they have to reach up to the top shelf and take down a binder that weighs 5 pounds, which they can't do. Well, that's not an essential duty of the job. It's not aligned with the job specs. And, well, like I said, it's not an essential duty. So, where can you get some sources for job information? We've talked about the supervisor, the incumbent. So, for some jobs, some common jobs, usually non-exempt jobs, HRs can supplement the information that they use from their own observations from talking to incumbents and supervisors with what's called the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which is published by the Department of Labor. And on the web, there's a site called the Occupational Information Network. It's an online job description database. It's developed by the Labor Department. Now, I don't think wholesale copying of that information would be extremely useful in the job analysis. However, it may be a very good starting point. So, job specs. What's the difference? So, whereas the job description focuses on the activities involved in carrying out a job, the job specs look at the qualities of the person performing the job. More of a knowledge, skills, abilities, and other stuff needed to perform the job. These are observable only when individuals are carrying out the TDRs that we talked about of the job. Remember what those are? We'll go back a couple of slides. The tasks, duties, and responsibilities. So when you're observing those tasks, details and responsibilities of the job, afterwards you show certainly the product of their labor. And sometimes, again, they're just characteristics. They're not directly observable, but they're still important, extremely important. Okay, so for example, if someone applied for a job as a news photographer, you really couldn't simply look at the individual to determine whether he or she can spot and take effective photographs. However, you could draw conclusions later about the person's skills, knowledge, skills, and abilities by looking at examples of their photographs. So how do we use this job analysis? Well, first we can look at it as part of work redesign, improving the organization, making different processes work most efficiently within the organization. Oftentimes, if you're producing a new widget or gadget or changing your services, you might need to redesign the work. And to do so, you really need to have a key job analysis. A recent job analysis. Key is fine, but a recent job analysis. I don't know if I've mentioned this in this presentation yet or not, but I'm going to talk about it again. The job analysis is a building block of a lot of the human resources management function. So HR planning. We need to know what knowledge, skills, and abilities and TDRs a person might need to do a particular job. Then we look at the organization, how it's structured, we follow through on the job analysis, and it helps us with HR planning. Job analysis is key in the selection process because we select people for jobs based on their ability to perform the job and to perform the job as defined by the information that you have gathered from a job analysis. Training. So if you find a delta, or if there's a work change, a merger and acquisition, any number of things that causes a change in the organization, or if you discover that the incumbents really don't have the skills, the necessary skills to do the job, then it will and should be a basis for deciding what training should be delivered. Performance appraisals. People should be evaluated against the job description, the specs. So you need a job analysis to create the end goals by which individuals are evaluated. Career planning. So for an individual or an organization, if you know the job specs and job analysis, you want to be promoted to the next level, you can see what they're looking for and try to get development in the areas in which you're weakest so that you could be qualified for the next job. And working with your supervisor and the organization, perhaps go to different trainings that might give you those skills. So job evaluations is a little bit interesting because we haven't covered compensation and pay processes yet. But a job analysis is extremely critical for a process called a job evaluation. So most companies have a compensation structure, a leveling of jobs in which a particular job might fall. And then within that job level, there's a midpoint, a maximum, and a minimum. So let's take, for example, welder 1, welder 2, and welder 3. So I do a job analysis for what widget or output I need. I discover that this welder for this job needs a very high level of welding ability, maybe 15 years of experience. And so I go out and take the TDRs and the KSAs and I compare those against other similar jobs and welding jobs, etc. And I determine, okay, this job is at the level called level 5. Just make that up, level 5. Welder 3 is a level 5. The executive secretary is a level 5. An entry-level engineer is a level 5. I'm just throwing out some titles. And then everybody that's a level 5 is put together in a group, and they're managed against what's called a compo ratio, or a midpoint of salary for that job. It's kind of how much the job is worth, but you have to figure out how much the job is worth by looking at the job analysis and doing a comparison and an evaluation. So job redesign and design, process of defining how work will be performed and what tasks will be required in a given job. So redesign is a similar process that involves changing an existing job design. So an HR, to design a job effectively, must really have a thorough knowledge of the job itself and its place in the particular unit's workflow by understanding the workflow analysis. So work redesign here. What if you're starting up a company and you need a sales manager or a sales director? You can design the job based on the key functions, activities, place the job, and then you've got this job design or job redesign, and you can fill the position based on those criteria. So let's talk about job design a little bit more. Job design can include efficiency, motivation, safety and health, and mental capacity. So you're doing a job analysis, you're looking at a job. It's not just looking at the job, it's designing the job, especially for a new job or relooking at an existing job. So you look at efficiency. How efficient is this process that we have set up? Could it be more efficient if we split the duties or we gave the people more responsibility? You look at efficiency. That's kind of the engineering way of taking a look at a job. It's the mechanics of doing the job. Now, motivation, designing a job based on motivation is inherently critical if we're trying to retain our best employees. So there's a lot of studies out there that say or tell you what, let's see, activities within a job are valued by employees. It could be job enrichment, in which they can do more for the company. Perhaps it's job completion. So instead of everybody just screwing on one nut in a car assembly line, they get to do the whole fender and wheel assembly so they can see a finished product, which is considered motivational. So there are several ways to look at a job as you're designing it as we go forward. Some people may just say, okay, this is what the person needs to do. Like they're a cog in a wheel, a cog in a system. Important, but that's not everything. How do we design a job based on motivational patterns? And that's where a skilled, trained human resources individual can come in and add a lot of value. Hey, these sorts of activities provide more motivation, interest, and most importantly, well, maybe not most importantly, but importantly, provide a better widget at the end of the process. So certainly we need to make sure that when our jobs are created, we consider the safety and the health of the individuals. I think that stands on its own, but you want to be very careful. Ergonomically speaking, it's not a new process or a new thought process anymore, but the best companies, the best HRs are trying to design jobs in which the ergonomics will not damage the individual, certainly safety-wise on an immediate basis, but long-term. Carpal tunnel is one of the prevailing reasons that people go out on long-term disability or short-term disability. So in an office job, in an office environment, how do we place the keyboards? How do we place the monitors? What kind of chairs do we use? What kind of breaks do we give the individual, etc., that can minimize problems, health concern problems on a long-term basis. So mental capacity. Is important when you create the job. If you're asking somebody that is a welder at the same time to do some high-level calculus to finish the job, or maybe do their own drafting on a CAD program, you've got a job description or a job that it might be impossible to fill because of training or extensive knowledge required for one portion of the job and not for the other. So that was our discussion on job analysis. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you.